All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Brenna. I am an employee at NOCD. I also have OCD myself. I'll be covering for Dr. McGrath tonight. He is away actually at the IOCDF conference in Florida. So I know he misses you guys. He does this every Wednesday and does a great job. So I'm happy to be covering for him. I think it'll be fun coming from a lived experience perspective. And I've been dealing with OCD my whole life. So I'm happy to share my story and answer all your questions. I'm not a clinician, but I do have lived experience, like I said, and we'll be happy to tackle some of these questions with you guys. So I'm going to wait maybe a minute before we get started. This will be fun. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat and I'll just work through them this whole hour. I know I have big shoes to fill tonight. Dr. McGrath is awesome at these. All right. How about we get started? Let's see here. All right, GD. GD asks, I often overthink issues related to my gender identity, which sometimes prevents me from doing what I want. Is ERP applicable for the rumination in my case? Because I think it is helping me till now. Great question. So I have a couple thoughts with this. The gender identity, that's definitely a big one for OCD. I feel like a lot of times we all see these specific themes, and if your obsessions don't fit in that box of themes that's being talked about a lot, sometimes people think that they may not have OCD if they don't see their theme or what they're going through. So just want to reiterate that any thoughts can be OCD. And so I know that there's like a lot of big ones that people talk about, like OCD themes, and sometimes gender identity isn't up there. But, it is anything can be, your OCD can latch on to anything. So just wanted to point that out. And I'm so sorry that your OCD is, preventing you from doing what you want. That's not what we want right here, and OCD's job is it wants to make you live in accordance to what OCD wants, not what GD wants. And the goal is to get back to living the life that you want to live and not the life that OCD wants you to live, which I know Dr. McGrath talks about a lot. So is ERP applicable for the rumination in my case? Absolutely. I think sometimes rumination makes your brain and everything feel so blurry and you're not sure what's going on, you just feel anxious. What you may not know is that you could be doing mental compulsions already, and sometimes they're really, really hard to spot. I'm curious if you guys struggle with mental compulsions, feel free to drop it in the chat. We can talk more about that. But mental compulsions are hard because they're not outwardly expressed. In this case, you're probably not washing your hands for gender identity OCD. You could be reviewing your past or Googling or asking for reassurance. And sometimes that can get really foggy in your brain and you're not sure what you're doing. But ERP is definitely applicable for the rumination. Something I've only struggled with mental compulsions and OCD in my brain. I've never struggled with outwardly like washing my hands. I've never tapped, a lot of people struggle with like needing to tap certain things or do certain things a certain number of times. I've never struggled with that. I've only done compulsions in my brain. And I was able to find success with ERP for my mental compulsions. So the first thing I needed to do was be able to recognize what I was doing, what my compulsions were. So anything that relieved my anxiety from those scary thoughts, I would write those down. I'd write what I would be doing right after to make my anxiety go away. And that's your compulsion. And so being able to spot that is really difficult. But once you're able to recognize what you're doing, writing those down, that's what I did, you're able to then hopefully resist the urge to make those compulsions because, as we all know, compulsions is what makes the OCD cycle stronger. All right, tip talks. Can you take breaks in your exposure homework? Like if you're doing it and get really overwhelmed, can you step away for a few minutes and then return to it? Definitely. I think especially at the beginning of your ERP, it can be really tricky and really hard. I also wonder if maybe you're doing exposures that are too difficult right now because we want to start at the very bottom of the hierarchy and pick something, an exposure that will maybe cause you a little bit anxiety, but not an extreme level just yet because we need to build that foundation first to be able to show your brain that you can do this and you can expose yourself, you can sit with the anxiety and not perform compulsions. And then you build that confidence over time and you're able to try harder exposures and build your way up. So just a reminder to let's start low and build that foundation. Because I feel like if you go straight to the very, very hard exposure, your worst fear, that can throw you off. And maybe not, it would be really discouraging for me to start with my very worst exposure at the beginning. So just a thought, but I totally agree that taking breaks is fine. I think it can be a lot. Just remember that, ERP is short-term discomfort for long-term relief. I had to tell myself that all the time going through OCD therapy is just right now it's really uncomfortable. I don't want to do it, but the more that you practice it and the easier it becomes, the better you get at it and you just continue on. Let's see. Next question. Any tips on how to stick with ERP? Sometimes it's so easy to chicken out of doing exposures, especially when it gets scary. Yep. I totally hear you. I think, like just what I was saying, starting small. And again, I think building that confidence and training your brain that you can do these things is really, really important at first. And again, it's for your future self. Keep that in mind. And I can totally empathize with you there, though. It gets scary. I mean, our therapy for OCD is, you're being told to face your biggest fear, something that you've been struggling with for maybe a while now. And you're being told to literally face your biggest fear and not do anything about it, not perform compulsions. And that can be scary. All right. How do I know I have OCD and what are the symptoms? Great question. So, for OCD, you have obsessions and compulsions, but obsessions normally go against your values. You don't want those thoughts. They cause really, really extreme anxiety. And a lot of times before therapy, to get rid of those obsessional thoughts and the anxiety that comes with that, a lot of people perform compulsions. So you need to have compulsions for it to be OCD. Compulsions is what unfortunately keeps you stuck in the cycle, even though you think it's, doing you good and making those thoughts go away. The thoughts always come back doing those compulsions. And then the disorder part, I believe in the DSM-5, it's you have to be struggling with your obsessions and compulsions for over 1 hour a day. And that technically qualifies you as having OCD. And then what are the symptoms? Normally people really, really don't want those thoughts. That's the biggest thing is they're ego dystonic, we say. So that means it goes against your values. And these thoughts cause a lot of discomfort for people. All right. Tammy, I've been having on and off existential feeling like the people around me aren't real. Everything feels fuzzy, hyper aware of my existence, and it makes me feel uncomfy. Yeah, totally. I think just like every theme, people are very, very hyper aware of your theme. So what's going on around you. In this case, you're probably, again, like hyper aware of your existence and it makes you feel uncomfortable. I think the more that you try to focus on your existence and actively trying to understand what's going on, that's what keeps you stuck in the cycle and causes you harm, mentally over and over again is that hyper awareness of what's going on around you. And I've actually never struggled with existential OCD, but I can relate, I've struggled with a lot of different other themes. And I know the more I try to control my situation, control what my thoughts or what I'm doing, and hyper aware of how I'm feeling, the more I get stuck in that cycle. You've been in therapy for 6 months doing ERP, keep relapsing, causing depression. Tammy, I'm so sorry that you're struggling with this, and just know that no matter how long you have OCD or you're stuck in a cycle, no matter how long, there is hope for recovery. And I think another thing about OCD is it can really cause depression. A lot of times that comes along with the OCD, and we have to tackle both of those at the same time, which can be difficult. But again, there is hope for recovery. I've struggled with OCD plus depression, and I think the hardest part for me was getting the motivation to actually want to get better and to perform my exposures. And once I stopped laying in bed, once I got up and decided to live my life how I wanted to, and then was fully into ERP, went straight in with it. Once I kept on doing that over time, it does get better. Let's see. Yeah, what tips do you have for people losing motivation while in the middle of exposure therapy? Yeah, it feels really difficult when you're in it, right? And it feels like you don't want to do it. It's hard. Again, I've been telling people this, it's that short-term discomfort for the long-term relief. And I think a lot of times the lack of motivation comes from just it being hard. You're doing your exposure and it feels like you can't do it. It feels real. And once you take that risk of, I don't know if it's real, I don't know, and you sit with that in exposure therapy, you will over time be able to see your progress. It does take time though. A lot of times people think it's a quick fix. It's not. And it can take months. It can take a different amount of times for anyone to feel that relief. But no matter how long you're stuck and no matter how severe you are, there is hope for recovery. Why is OCD so disabling? It's a great question, Albert. I have been right there. At my worst, I felt like I couldn't move. I felt like I was stuck in bed. I totally understand. I think a lot of times the disabling part comes from the depression of the OCD, and OCD is such a tricky disorder because it's a liar, and the worst part is that it feels real. I've said this, I do the NOCD Instagram Wednesday Q&As every Wednesday, and a lot of times people ask, it feels real, but what if it's real? What if my thoughts are real? And it's true. That's the worst part, in my opinion, because you wouldn't be struggling this hard if it didn't feel like it was becoming true, whatever your obsessions are. So, it's OCD is a liar, and it's going to tell you things and it's going to keep on doing that. And of course, our brain, once you get a scary thought, whatever the theme is, our brain wants to protect ourselves. And it will automatically, sometimes you think automatically, do things to get rid of that anxiety and those thoughts, which ultimately causes you to be stuck in that cycle. Should I continue working with my therapist who is learning experience with me or see a NOCD therapist? I think the most important part is your therapist practicing evidence-based treatments and practicing the gold standard treatment of OCD, which is exposure response prevention. All right, Lauren, what advice could you give with someone with harm OCD? My brain feels like it's never stopped searching for possible scenarios. It's gotten to the point where I have full body shakes and feel so depressed. Lauren, I feel you. I've gone through harm OCD myself, but more so towards myself. So I had suicidal OCD, which I didn't have suicidal ideation. That's completely different. I had unwanted thoughts about causing harm to myself. And it was really hard because, your compulsions, at least mine, were I wouldn't want to be around sharp objects. I was reassuring myself that I liked my life, that I wasn't depressed. And I would, again, like you're saying, search for possible scenarios of, what could happen in the future and how do I avoid that. And so the part where you say my brain feels like it never stops, I think for me, I totally can relate to you on that because it it feels like it's your brain is mush and it feels like you're always anxious 24/7 and you don't know how to make it stop. And I think a lot of times it's you're performing compulsions that you may not know. And at least that was for me in my case. I decided one day, my therapist helped me with this, sit down and, you know, what am I doing to make the anxiety or try to make the anxiety go away? And those are my compulsions. Secondly, I think it's important to train your brain to know that you can sit through this terrible anxiety. Because whenever I tried to get rid of my anxiety, whenever I felt like I can't do this, this is too hard, I don't like to live like this, I need to go back to bed because the anxiety is too bad all day, every day. Whenever I trained my brain to, living my life despite having anxiety and it felt really, really hard, once I trained myself to do that, it did get easier over time. Um, and I hope that helps, Lauren. Let's see. Evan, hi Brenna. I've suffered with OCD for 8 years. I feel like it has taken my identity away. Even when I do return to my hobbies, the realization of OCD always hits again. Evan, I understand what you're saying with it feels like OCD is taking your identity away. I think OCD questions a lot of things, and sometimes it feels so hard and your brain is mush that you have no idea who you are anymore. You don't know what your values are, and I get it. And whenever you return to your hobbies, it feels like OCD hits you again. I understand that, and I think it's one of those things where you have to give yourself self-compassion no matter how it feels. I think the idea of feeling something with OCD can sometimes be tricky because when you're struggling with OCD, you sometimes can't trust all of your feelings that come in. And because OCD is just going to keep on throwing things at you and you don't know what's real and you don't know what it is. And I think that's the whole point of OCD therapy is to be able to live with not knowing, and but I think once you start getting back into your hobbies, like you're doing that, you start to get positive reinforcement. You keep on doing things. And over time, you really find yourself again. And it's like building yourself back up, building your confidence. And there is hope for recovery to feel like yourself again, despite living with OCD. Let's see. Even if the thoughts are scary, should I still let myself think about the thoughts and do ERP? Yeah, I think one thing that helped me is radical acceptance of my thoughts. So, say if I had a really scary thought about, say, for instance, if it was harm OCD, what if I lose control and hurt someone? What I would recommend, what I've done in the past that's helped me, is I let those thoughts in and didn't do anything about them. And that sounds so scary because all you want to do is just tell yourself, no, I don't want to do that. That's not true. Or neutralize it saying, and the more I learned over time, the more I tried to control my thoughts and control everything about it, the worse I got. So I decided to try a different route. and let these thoughts come in my brain and not do anything about them. Just let them sit there and without judgment. That's another key part of this is the more that you judge your thoughts for coming in, why am I having this? This isn't me. That's also doing a compulsion. So radical acceptance, keeping them in there and not doing anything about them mentally or physically. It takes time and you're not going to be perfect at it at first. I wasn't, but over time it gets easier and better, and then you're able to apply that with everything else in your life and with OCD in the future. Let's see. Ellie, thanks for asking. I feel that at times I get hooked on every little thought and go down a rabbit hole. Instead of just looking at things and brushing them off, I torture myself with a thought and make them bad. Yeah, Ellie, it sounds like that you're actively trying to figure out these thoughts. And, by figuring out, I mean, are they true? Do you want these thoughts? Going down that rabbit hole, and that causes anxiety. And it's hard to not do that again because your brain is trying to protect you. And so I wouldn't say you're torturing yourself. I would say it's your brain trying to protect you. And it doesn't make sense right now, but it will, I think. And again, like I said with the last one of just the radical acceptance, I think being able to take any thought in and let them sit there and not try to get rid of them, not thought blocking them, letting them go. Because going down a rabbit hole, you may not know it, but you could be performing compulsions that are making you go down that rabbit hole, which is not fun to go through. I've been there, and just know you can get through this, Ellie. You can. Let's see. How long into exposure therapy did it take for you to notice a significant difference in your OCD? Great question. Now, I want to preface by saying that everyone's experience is going to look different. I've met some people where it takes them a long time to get the gist of exposure therapy and to even want to do it because it is scary, like we talked about at the beginning. And other times people just jump right in. For me, I was the latter. I think I was at a really, really low place in my life, and all I needed, I had to get better to be able to function. And so I remember taking that risk right off the bat with my therapist and saying, you know what? I've tried getting rid of these thoughts. I've tried doing all these things, and it led me to being bedbound. So I need to do something different. And so I dove deep into doing ERP right off the bat and allowed myself to sit in the uncertainty from the beginning, which a lot of people, it takes time, and that's okay. Everyone's journey is different. For me, I just jumped in right then. I think I was also struggling with depression at the time too. So I needed to get help for both. And I want to say from my experience, it was a few months before maybe 1 month before I felt more like myself again, and my anxiety decreased at that 1 month mark. I would say by 2 months, I was feeling a lot better and was able to do ERP and do all these things by myself after the 2 months mark. And then I think it's also important to continue doing that even after you're feeling better, just to make sure that you have the tools in your toolbox to face OCD in the future. I think sometimes OCD can be a chronic condition. So just making sure the tools you have are able to get you through OCD thoughts in the future. So for me, to answer your question, it took a couple months for me to get back on my feet and to feel confident in treating my OCD going forward. Let's see. All right. David, can you talk about how to get out of the thought loop? So, David, I think what you mean by that is, the OCD cycle, which is OCD thought comes in and it's scary. Let's use an example of sexual orientation OCD. So say you are a straight female and the thought comes in as, what if I'm actually not straight? What if I've been lying to myself and I am actually gay? And so what would happen then is you would do a compulsion. So at that point, a lot of different compulsions for this would be, reassuring yourself, saying, no, I'm not this. I've always been a straight female my entire life. I'm not this way. Or maybe reviewing past experiences, of you reminding yourself that you are attracted to um, males. And so doing that compulsion that provides that relief for, a short period of time, gives you that anxiety away. And then it always comes back. The loop always comes back to the, well, what if this next? And it keeps you stuck. Now, getting out of that thought loop comes in at the compulsion part, because you can't control what comes in your brain. You cannot control your thoughts. Your thoughts do not make you a bad person. It's not your fault. The thoughts come in. Everybody experiences intrusive thoughts. It's how you deal with them. It's how you react to those thoughts. So right now in the OCD cycle, the reaction is you're performing a compulsion. So to change that, we have to try to get rid of those compulsions. So in this example, the obsession was, what if I am actually gay? The compulsion part was reassuring yourself, looking back. You would not do any of that compulsion part. You wouldn't check. You wouldn't try to do that. You wouldn't try to look back in your past. And getting rid of that compulsion and sitting with that thought, of that what if thought that was at the beginning, being able to sit with that without doing anything breaks that cycle, breaks that thought loop, like you said, David, over time. And it's not a quick fix, like we were saying earlier, but that taking the compulsion out of the cycle is what gives you that freedom. Evan, how do I remove this fraud label that OCD has placed on me? Evan, I'm so sorry that OCD has made you feel that way. It's not your fault. OCD is a liar. I think with OCD comes a lot of other emotions like shame and guilt, feeling like a fraud. That comes along with OCD. You're not alone in that. And I felt all these different things. Something that helped me was, deciding that I wanted to look at myself away from my disorder. And your OCD is not all that you are. You are a beautiful, full person that deserves all the amazing things in life, and to deserve a beautiful and full life despite living with OCD. And now I will say OCD has made me into the person that I am. And, I feel lucky to be in this position that I am today. It's brought me a lot of great things, but what helped me is OCD is over here and Brenna, I'm right here, and I can live with it. It can come with me, but it's not going to be the driver. I'm going to be the driver and it's going to be in the passenger seat. So, Evan, just want you to know that you're not alone feeling like this. I think a lot of people struggle with those different emotions. Ellie, great question. I feel like since finding OCD, I use a library and articles the website offers as compulsions for reassurance. Is that bad? I think everything and anything can be a compulsion. If you're going on the website to find relief, to find answers, then maybe we stop doing that and see what happens. I think, education is great. You have to balance the whole idea of learning more about your OCD and also not it being a compulsion, right? And that's really difficult to discern what is what. So I think sitting down with yourself and asking, am I looking at these articles after I'm triggered? Am I yeah, am I looking at these to find relief from the anxiety? I would ask yourself that. Let's see. You guys are asking some great questions. Let's see. Before I do a compulsion, I seek a safe space, either mental or actual. Any tips on preventing that? And instead sitting with, yeah, great question. I can relate to that. So, for those that you don't know, a lot of times people with OCD will latch on to safety behaviors. So, a safe person or a safe place, or thinking something that makes you feel safe, which can be a compulsion. Safety behaviors are what also makes OCD stick with you. And sometimes it's hard, and sometimes you don't even know that you're doing a safety behavior. For me, one of my safety behaviors whenever I was struggling with OCD is I would go back home and stay with my mom. And because she felt safe, that felt like a safe place to me. And whenever I'm not struggling with OCD, I love my mom, but I'm not going back there all the time to stay with her. I'm living my life in a different state and trying to do the different things. So um, whenever I realized that I was wanting to go back and stay with her for a long time, I knew that that was a safety behavior for me. And you're right. So, any tips on preventing that and instead sitting with the intrusive thoughts? Yeah. I think also recognizing that what you're doing, these behaviors are these your safety behaviors, and that will ultimately not break you free from OCD. And also, it's training yourself and building your confidence that you don't need those safety behaviors. So again, that starts small. That starts at, for me, it was I left my mom's place earlier than I would have. And I told my brain, I trained my brain to knowing that it was okay. And so it does take time, and safety behaviors can keep you stuck too. So great question. Let's see. Evan, yeah, I don't see my OCD theme anywhere, so it makes me feel alone. I know that logically that this isn't true, but my OCD tells me that it's different. I'm actually mentally insane. Yep. OCD is going to make you feel like your situation, that your case is the worst, and that no one has seen it before, that, you need special treatment, that you know, you're the only one that's going through that at that time. And OCD is going to make you feel like that. Um, I do think, there again, like I was saying at the very beginning, that there is like specific focus on certain themes. And I try to like bring awareness to this, that just because you don't see your specific obsessions and your theme somewhere, that does not mean that you don't have OCD. OCD can latch on to anything. Um, for example, I don't really talk about that much, but I think this will help Evan with this. I struggled with developing my OCD was developing another mental illness. So I struggled for a long time with the obsessions of what if I developed an eating disorder. And it was really, really scary for me because I felt like no one else was going through what I was going through and no one else could relate. But then I talked to someone randomly about it, and they were like, "Oh, I actually know someone that is going through that right now." So I think it's a reminder that people, you're not alone. Basically, you're not alone with whatever you're going through. OCD can latch on to absolutely anything and everything. I do think it is good to highlight some specific themes just because they're very common. The common ones, it's good to know and bring awareness to those. So, but just because you don't see your theme in one of those common themes doesn't mean that you don't have OCD and you're not alone. Let's see. All right. When you leave the house and doubt that you checked something, should you sit with that discomfort? Yes. It's funny you bring this up because this was my last. I just got triggered by this exact same thing over the 4th of July weekend. And what happened was I was leaving my house and going to a different state, driving 4 hours. And I got in my car, got in the highway, and immediately I thought, did I turn off the stove? Did I leave it on? Because I cooked eggs that morning and I couldn't remember if I had turned the stove off for some reason. And immediately my whole body went into fight or flight. I got so anxious driving is the only thing I could think about for about 30 minutes. And that whole 30 minutes, I was thinking, I can just turn back around right now. I can easily go back home and just check. I can turn 30 minutes around, add an hour to my time and do that. And I almost turned around probably 3 or 4 times, but at the end of the day, I decided I'm gonna sit with it, and in my brain, the worst case scenario was that my apartment would burn down, and so I saw that image in my brain, and I decided right then that I was not gonna turn around. I was gonna sit with that horrible feeling of what's gonna happen, and decided I was going to try that route. And to my surprise, actually, within a few minutes, about 20 minutes, I wasn't even thinking about it anymore, which was huge for me. And I was able to just be proud of myself for that because in the past, I would not have been able to do that. I would have turned back around, been late to whatever I was going to, and check probably multiple times to make sure. And so I was really proud of myself. And so, yes, I would say next time this happens, is it Mona or Mana? I would say just try something different and try to not check and see what happens. All right. Next question. Let's see. Why do themes change? I feel relief from one theme and then another one steps up to the plate. Yep. Are we moving past them or is a new theme just more pressing to the brain? Yeah, great question. I feel like it's OCD's last shot at keeping you stuck is at whenever you finally get over one theme, another one just pops up. And, it's really annoying when you're going through it because you're like, man, I just worked so hard to get over this and now a different theme pops up. I have a couple thoughts. One, I think it's OCD trying to stay with you. And two, I think it sometimes can be a good thing because I think after you go through therapy with one theme, it's pretty cool to test your skills on another theme and could be good for you in the long run. So just know that you got through this one theme, you can get through another. And yeah, you can do it. I can totally empathize with you on this as well. Went through the really bad health OCD one, and then another theme pops up right as I was getting better and came full force. And I was like, all right, so let's take what I've learned and see what happens. And I was able to work through it. I think, the more triggers, sometimes the better because you're able to work on your ERP and you're able to live the life that you want to live ultimately. All right, Daniel. Hello, I have pure OCD and feel like it's messing with my feelings. It's getting severe. I don't know who I am anymore. Any advice? First thing, Daniel, I've been there. I think pure OCD it's like pure obsessional OCD. But however, I haven't met many people where you're not experiencing compulsions with that pure OCD. So again, I know it's a lot harder because it's in your brain. All your obsessions and compulsions, your anxiety is all in your brain. You're not doing anything outwardly. Recognize and being aware of what your mental compulsions are is the first step. And I think OCD can truly get to the point of you don't know who you are, you don't know what your values are anymore. I've been there. Just know that you can get out of it. There is hope for recovery. I think it starts with recognizing your compulsions, recognizing what you're doing to relieve that anxiety of the thoughts. Whatever you're doing there, that compulsion is what's keeping you in that cycle. So once you break the cycle by deleting or resisting, reducing your compulsions, whenever you do that, that is when eventually you'll find the freedom from this horrible anxiety, from the horrible thoughts. Sorry, not the thoughts. One note here, I want to make it clear that everybody can experience intrusive thoughts. I'm sure every single person in the world gets a scary thought once in a blue moon, maybe often. It's how we react to those thoughts. Now, us with OCD, there's something in our brain that signals a threat. So whenever someone experiences a scary thought that doesn't have OCD, they could probably continue on with their day and it doesn't affect them. But with us with OCD, sometimes these thoughts get stuck and it's a misfiring in the brain that keeps you stuck and wanting to perform these compulsions, and it feels like a threat. So it's not about controlling what comes in your brain and thoughts. You can't help that. I tried controlling thoughts. It doesn't work. Take it from me. So it's not about controlling what thoughts come in your brain. It's how we respond and react to those thoughts that come in our brain. All right. So when you say sit with that feeling or that thought, what does that actually look like? Because I try to, but I find myself seeking comfort. Yeah. So let's see. So for me, it was, what if I developed an eating disorder? What if I didn't actually want to eat? Whenever I would have those thoughts come in, what I would do is, a thought would just pop in. It would be, am I hungry? What if I'm not hungry? What does that mean about me? And I would normally, before I did therapy, that I would be checking. So I would be checking to see if I was hungry. I would see what time I ate earlier in the day to see if I should be hungry now, doing all these different things to determine what my thoughts meant and to try to get rid of them. And when I did that, the worse I got. It didn't work. It did not work. So sitting with I don't know. I don't know. And I'm not going to answer those questions right now. I'm not going to try to find the answer to that question. That's what I did. That's what it looked like for me. I think everybody's journey is different. Everybody's theme and thoughts may look different. But for me, it was not trying to relieve the anxiety that came with those thoughts. Again, it takes time, but you can do it. All right. Charlotte, I have so much trouble opening up to important people in my life about my OCD because it's like I'm convinced it would make me a bad person to talk about myself. Any tips? Yeah, I think a lot of times people with OCD, we're also perfectionists and don't want people to worry about us. At least for me, that's what I went through. And I didn't want anyone to know what I was going through for a couple different reasons. One, I had taboo thoughts and I didn't want people that didn't understand the disorder to hear that my thoughts and think something was actually wrong. So that was a big part of it. But now I feel like it's gotten better and more people are aware of the disease, which is great, or the disorder. So now I feel like I'm able to talk about it a little bit more for myself. And again, that's why awareness is so important, and destigmatizing OCD. Um, I think a lot of people, Charlotte, would love to hear about what you're going through. I was pleasantly surprised by my close circle of friends whenever I started telling people about my journey with OCD. I was pleasantly surprised with how they responded, because it wasn't with oh, why why is she having these thoughts? Something's wrong. It wasn't any of that. It was, tell me more. I want to learn more about OCD and what you're going through. And I was surprised. So I think most people in your life will want to hear more and will want to be there for you. But it does take courage and bravery, first talking about it. All right. John, whenever I talk to people about my OCD, they sound either skeptical or dismissive, and I start to feel awful. How do I deal with this? Isn't that the worst? Yeah, I think unfortunately it's how OCD has been portrayed. I think most of us can relate to the fact that OCD has been shown to be people being clean, and that's not what OCD is. That's not all OCD. And bringing more awareness to the situation is really, really, really important. Um, I I remember one of my close friends actually kept on saying, "Oh, I'm just a little OCD," or we're all a little OCD, and I was really hurt by that comment at first, but then as time went on, I decided to shift my perspective, because I realized that a lot of people just don't know. They don't know how severe or what OCD really is. And I thought it would be a good time for me to bring awareness to it. And so talking about what I've gone through really helped, one, our friendship get closer and deeper, but two, just bring awareness to our community, the OCD community. Um, One side note, John, not sure if you've watched Turtles All the Way Down. It's a movie, and it's finally the first movie slash TV show that displays OCD and what it actually is that I've seen. It's amazing. So anyone here that hasn't watched it, it's called Turtles All the Way Down. It was written by John Green. It was a book before. Very great. And it definitely brings awareness to our disorder, which is amazing. All right. So it's about controlling our response to the thoughts. Exactly. Yes. That is all what ERP is. It's responding to those thoughts. And sometimes the best way to do that is by not responding and just letting those thoughts come into your brain. It's controlling exactly your behavior and your response to your thoughts. All right. I have a trip planned tomorrow, but now that it's close, I'm afraid I'm going to get someone sick. Yeah, I think this is a huge one, especially since COVID. People get really worried about getting people sick and go down a rabbit hole of, well, then what if they get their elderly grandma sick? And then what if this? And then it goes down a rabbit hole. Um, don't let OCD and these thoughts turn you away from doing the things that you actually want to do. Because not going on this trip is going to bring more power to OCD, and it'll come back stronger. So, my encouragement for you is to go on this trip and to have fun and not let OCD dictate what you're doing. Let's see. All right, not sure if you spoke about hand washing or checking locks. Yeah, these can be huge compulsions. The checking and the hand washing. Um, Another one of those things where the more that you keep doing it, the more it's going to stay, and you'll never ever feel satisfied enough for OCD. OCD will never ever make you feel satisfied enough with what you're doing to make it go away. So that can be with any compulsion. So whether it be hand washing, checking locks, or giving yourself reassurance, or Googling something, you may think that you found an answer for a second and then give OCD a few minutes and then it'll come up with another, well, what if this now? Whatever you're doing, it's never going to be enough to make OCD happy. It'll never be enough for it to go away. And I think that's one of my biggest lessons going through recovery was that you'll never be able to satisfy OCD. So don't even try. And it was hard at first for my brain to wrap, for myself to wrap that idea around, was that nothing will ever be good enough for OCD. You'll never find an answer. And you can go on a huge quest to find that golden answer. You may feel that way for a second, and it'll come another what if thought comes right back. What types of OCD are there? How do I know which one is bothering me at the moment? Yeah, I would say for this, Charlotte, go on our website. So just NOCD.com. There's a lot of the different common subtypes that you can go through. Keep in mind, like we were talking about earlier, that just because you don't see your theme doesn't mean that you don't have OCD. So keep that in mind. There's lots of great resources on our website. I would say first to go on there. Let's see. Great question. This is how to differentiate OCD thoughts from negative thoughts that are experienced typically, so to not attach the OCD labels to all thoughts that occur. Yeah, I think we're all going to experience negative thoughts, and I think it really does it determines how your quality of life is. So if it's really impacting your day-to-day, I would say that that's probably more OCD than just negative thoughts. And if the negative thoughts go against who you are, that's a big difference between just negative thoughts, because we're always, as humans, we're going to experience negative thoughts once in a while. It's just trying to differentiate, are these intrusive thoughts or are they just like normal thoughts? And one of the biggest things I've learned over time is that how to differentiate the two is that you don't want, for someone that has OCD, you don't want these thoughts. And obviously some people with negative thoughts that come in just that don't have OCD, they don't want those thoughts either, but they're able to move past them a lot more quickly than someone with OCD. And with OCD, you're trying to get rid of the thoughts by doing compulsions. Is existential OCD harder to treat than other subtypes? I've had other types, but this one is awful. You've raised a great point. So I don't know if anyone else can relate to this. Please feel free to drop it in the chat. But anytime I've experienced a new subtype, I've always thought, I just wish I had the other thought. I'm struggling with health OCD right now, but I wish I had the sexual orientation OCD, something like that. It always is going to feel like the one that you're in is the worst one. Always. And I think whenever you keep that in your mind going forward, it'll make things a little bit more easier, knowing that, whatever theme you're going through is going to feel like the most awful one, because it is awful. You don't like these thoughts that are coming in your brain. It feels awful. So you just always think Yeah, Tammy said in the chat, exactly. I always think another thing would be so much easier to deal with. Yep, I've thought that exact same thing, Tammy. It's you want someone else's theme. You hear about someone with a different type of a just right OCD or something, and you say, oh, that one would be easier. I just wish I had that one. They have no idea what I'm going through. And I can tell you, it's not just you thinking that. That is everyone. I'm sure that person with just right OCD is saying, oh, I wish I had existential OCD. And so just know that I feel like everyone goes through this exact same thing and you're not alone. I'm scared to talk to a therapist about my incriminating false memory OCD. Yeah, I think our therapists here at NOCD have heard just about everything. And what's great is that, they're not judgmental at all about your thoughts. And they know that everything is ego dystonic, meaning that it goes against your values. And I really think that, your therapist will make you feel safe in telling you that. And sometimes they will need to know all of the information to be able to create a plan to make you better. And I think by telling them important things like whatever you're going through with your OCD, whatever it may be, whatever how scary it is, it's important to bring up because it could be helping you long run to help you feel better. Let's see. We got a couple more minutes left. This has been awesome. Can the OCD obsessions base themselves out of fears, or what do they base themselves on? A lot of times people think that it's based on a core fear. So a lot of times people will try to dig deep into your theme and what is that core fear. And a lot of times your therapist will work with you to determine that core fear. I think a lot of times thoughts just come out of nowhere and you can get stuck like that. So I think some can be based out of fear. I think some you can't control. And it's just your brain throwing you something, and then your brain that has OCD is signaling a misfire to your brain. So that's what I would say to that. Let's see. Let's do this one last one. How do I feel with the strong urges of just right OCD? I've been dealing with it for years. Sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's not, but it affects me every day. Yeah, reminder that OCD, your obsessions can be thoughts, images, and urges. So this is a great reminder that it's not just what if thoughts. OCD can present itself as urges as well. So let's see how to do strong urges. Yeah, and so since urges are different than thoughts, a lot of times people are like, well, it must be real. I feel the urge to do something or the urge to do this. That doesn't make it more real than anything else. And so just keep that in mind. Just remember that, say, for just right OCD, if you need to touch something a certain amount of times to make it feel right, the more that you do those compulsions by making yourself feel just right, the more you'll get stuck. And nothing will ever be good enough for OCD here. But hang in there and know that ERP, exposure response prevention, can treat all different themes for OCD. Lastly, let's do this. Can everyone recover from OCD? I fully believe that everybody can recover from OCD, no matter the severity, no matter how long you've been stuck for, and no matter if you have comorbid conditions as well. Take it from me. I was very severe. I was stuck for a long time in my brain. And I also had depression and other things going on. And I'm able to live a full, beautiful life alongside my OCD. And I'm able to speak about it now. So I hope that my story, I hope that this answer to your question can provide you a little piece of hope and encouragement to keep on going, because know that you can recover. ERP can provide freedom and you can do it. So, all right, we hit that 8 p.m. mark. Thank you guys so much for joining. I know Dr. McGrath would love to see you next week. He'll be back, I believe. And thank you for joining. It was really fun meeting everybody. Hopefully I'll get to do this again. So thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your Wednesday.